Marriage is about love. Divorce is about money. Without the right guidance, critical mistakes can have lasting financial consequences. That is where I come in. My name is Gabriella Martinelli, founder at Ever After Wealth. As a certified divorce financial analyst, I provide my clients financial clarity, strategic divorce planning, and long-term stability. On this podcast, I am sharing what you need to know about getting through a divorce, protecting your legacy, growing your wealth and assets post-divorce, and figuring it out what you really want in this next stage of life. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Divorce and Money podcast. I am very excited for the conversation we're going to have today, and I will let Matt introduce himself. Matt, thank you for being here. I am excited about our conversation. I know everyone heard a little bit about what you do, who you are, but can you tell us something that you want everyone to make sure that they know about you? Maybe I didn't mention it, so I want you to introduce yourself with something that you want everyone to know about you, please.
Something I would like everybody to know about me, man. I think for the purposes of this conversation, I think that I would want everybody to know is I have been one of them, right? And I think, doing what I do and helping businesses transition into the next phase strategically of their the next iteration, right? I know what it's like as a business owner to be staring down the barrel of your business and going, what if I lose control, right? Who am I if I'm not a business owner? When I sold my business, oh my gosh, I'd lost more sleep over that than I did anything else. That I understand that price, the money you're going to make from it, isn't the only thing that matters when you're going through a business transition, selling it, exiting, whatever that is. So legacy matters, right? So I guess if I wanted somebody going into this to know one thing about me after listening to my bio, it's that I've been where you are, I've been in your chair, and I think about those things when I'm talking with people. So I don't know if that's a good place to start or not, Gabriella. What do you think?
I love it. Yes. No, I love it. I think that is very important for individuals to understand that you know where they've been, because you can understand a little bit better what they're feeling. And of course, you just mentioned succession and legacy. And of course, this is a divorce podcast, and probably individuals are wondering, okay, well, that has to do with me because I'm not going to sell my business tomorrow. However,
it matters. It matters.
Divorce I think, is one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a business. Especially business that have been running for a very long time, where there is one owner and they have a lot of legacy into that. Their life is into the business, and then divorce comes, and it's dangerous, is emotional. There's so many things that we can touch about that. So I feel like that's where this actually makes sense that we're talking about succession and legacy, not because you're selling, but because you're going through a divorce. If you're listening to this, you're probably going through a divorce, thinking about a divorce or something like that. So it is important that they understand how this is going to all come in together.
There's a reason I deliberately use the word strategic transition versus exit. Because for a lot of your audience, that's what they're thinking about, is how is this going to impact my business? Not that I want to leave it, but that I want to make sure I stay in it, that I stay in control of it, that my legacy is intact going forward.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story before we tell everyone, okay, how we make this happen. How is Matt going to be able to help us? Because, you said, what do you say? Strategic transition. Okay. So what I do is find divorce financial strategy, because I think that is, it comes to the bottom. You are restructuring your finances, restructuring your business, because you're going through a divorce. So you need a strategy all around. So I love that you're using that word too. But this is a little bit of a story. And I want everyone to kind of get into that place, because I lived it with not one client. This is one client that comes to mind, but a lot of my clients go through this, and I know how emotional and it's very unfortunate. People are going emotionally, and then also they think about losing money. They're losing their legacy. They're losing everything that they worked for maybe 25, 30 years, right? So I imagine this was my client. We walk into mediation. He was devastated because we're talking about a business that the value was close to $9 million. So it's just divorce math. Okay. Oh, well, Probably the judge will say, you got to give 4.5 to your spouse. Of course, this is very general, right? We're not talking about goodwill. We don't know exactly how much was marital or it wasn't, all of that good stuff. But in reality, he was stressing out because it's 4.5 million. Okay. The reality is there's no $4.5 million sitting in the bank account, right? If you're talking about a
Mm-hmm.
business, he had equipment, he had products, he had a warehouse, he had trucks, he had all of that. But, you can't grab one truck and tell your spouse, okay, here is, part of the $4.5 million, go sell it.
Well, if it's a
Um,
gold-plated truck, maybe, but yeah, probably not. Yeah.
maybe, but yeah, in general, right, it's not a thing. And walking into that mediation room, trying to say how we're going to resolve this strategically, where we have not just the business, there's other things, but sometimes it gets to the point where, okay, you had to give the other side everything, and on top of that, you still had to come out with some few $1 million because you had to pay them their share on the marital estate, right? Where maybe they're not business owners. They don't. I know on paper they're not the owner of the business, but they are entitled to that percentage because of divorce law, which is different in every state, but that is important. So
Well, and then
the
on top of that,
reality of
you've
this,
paid out that sum of money to them, and you still have to run your business, right? So you somehow you're paying them while running a
right?
successful business. Man, how do you balance that?
Exactly. And you have it right. And you want the business to continue. Again,
Mhm.
this is, I see the divorce as a subtraction. You're not making more. You're literally cutting it in half, giving somebody some. But the idea is that how do we know how to get this? Because in reality, you go to court, the judge is going to say, okay, well, Mr. Business Owner, if you don't have this money, you're going to have to sell your business. And there it goes.
Mhm.
So in
Stay tuned, everybody.
reality, exactly. So, but the good news, right, after all that desperation, is that there could be an opportunity. There's options, and I'm big in options and strategy when it comes to my
Mhm.
clients. And then it comes, Matt, with this brilliant option for business owners. And I think that we're not thinking about this enough. And I love to bring those conversations early with my business owners now, because I
Mhm.
think this is a brilliant opportunity where everyone gets what they are entitled to, right? Because at the same time, we need to understand the other spouse is entitled to a certain amount of money, and
Mhm.
you have to give it to them. And the idea is, how do we do this in a way that preserves your legacy, preserves your business, you still have control, and you don't go in debt forever? Because that is the other problem. You're paying this $4.5 million. What is coming from? It's coming from your after tax money, because that's the only
Mhm.
way you can pay this person, right? You can
Yep.
deduct a payment to your spouse on your corporate returns, right? Technically, you can do that. So, and I don't want to get ahead of my time. So, the brilliance of this is there is an option, and it has a very specific name. And Matt, I'm going to let you introduce that. What is that option that a business owner could potentially have within certain parameters, of course?
Well, let me just start by saying your enthusiasm for the topic
I
is
love it.
is infectious, right? And I'm glad to see that it hasn't waned since we talked for the first time about this option for your
Yes.
business owners.
Yes.
Um, and it's one of those things where I left our initial conversation thinking, man, how many people could this have helped in her practice? Right. So I'm so excited to bring this because what happens normally, right? You've already mentioned they have to sell their business, either whole or part of it.
Yeah.
That's usually not a good solution, right? Because you're bringing in outside investors.
Yeah.
Depending on how much you need to raise, you could be sacrificing control of the company or your influence on the board. And
Mm-hmm.
in the end, again, you still got to figure out how to pay it. And if you're bringing in a bank, if you're bringing it, man, there's just in the end, it doesn't feel good. And divorce never feels good. But in the same token, you don't want to lose everything through that process. And that's where the option we're going to talk about comes in. We're going to talk about employee stock ownership plans, ESOP,
Okay. ESOP.
ESOP. And I believe it's an elegant solution for some people who are going through this process, who are business owners who want to, like we've already talked about a few times, maintain control of their business, right? Get the money they need to meet their obligations while still keeping their identity as business owners, not giving that up, and preserving their legacy in the business by not having to walk away or not change the way that they run it on a day-to-day basis, right? So, I know we're going to dig into all the different facets of that, but the truth of it is if you're looking at a divorce and you're trying to figure out how am I going to come up with the money to pay my spouse, this is an option that I'm hoping you're listening to this podcast and listen to this conversation and walk away going, okay, yeah, this makes sense. We need to think about this.
Great. Now, so you just mentioned what ESOP means, but can you explain what it really means
Yeah.
in simple terms? So someone that is not,
Yep.
understanding those terms that we probably do, what is it? What is it? Is not tangible, but what is in simple terms an ESOP
Okay.
in
So
general?
an ESOP is three things. So here's what happens in an ESOP transaction is
Okay.
a trust is created, an ESOP trust.
Okay.
An ESOP trust then buys all or part of your company, depending on how much you would need to sell. Or a better way to say it is you sell as much of your company as you need to sell to the ESOP trust. The ESOP trust is overseen by a trustee. But I want to be crystal clear for everybody listening. The trustee does not get involved in the day-to-day of your business. The trustee does not want to get involved in the day-to-day of your business. The trustee is there to basically make sure to represent the employees through the transaction, meaning you're hiring the person you're negotiating with to sell all or part of your company to that trust. So you stay in control, you get the liquidity you need to meet your obligations. And oh, yeah, by the way, you get some tax breaks too. So let's talk about this. ESOP is three things. The first thing is it's a business transition tool, right? It is the only business transition tool where you stay in control. We're going to say control a lot, control, control, control. But the truth of it is for a lot of people listening to this, that is a primary consideration.
100%. Yes,
Very
I
true.
agree with
So,
that. 100%. Yeah.
so altogether now, control. You stay in control. It is also a great way to preserve your legacy within the business. It is a fantastic way to honor the people that helped you get there. And I know that's not a primary consideration for a lot of us, but on the same token, man, if you got to do it, you might as well feel good about it, right? So
100%. Yeah.
it is a
Some
business
positive
transition
out of
tool,
the disaster, right? Like you're
right?
doing all that. There has to be, you had to find the silver lining too.
Yep.
Yes, I
Yeah. So
agree.
it's a
Yeah.
tactical business transition tool. It is also an employee ownership vehicle. And here's what's kind of cool about this, right? Is if you have to go down this road and we're trying to find that silver lining, man, what if you created a system where the financial incentive of your employees is lined up with the financial incentive of your business for the first time? Right? What if you created a structure where you could hire and retain better talent because you're partially employee owned? What if you created a structure where your business grows faster because you're employee owned? ESOP companies tend to grow 2.3 to 2.5% faster than non-ESOP companies.
That
They're
makes
more
sense.
productive than non-ESOP companies. The first year after an ESOP is formed, productivity tends to increase 4 to 6%. Employees stay at ESOP companies 4 times longer than non-ESOP companies, right? So as a business, you're setting yourself up to be better off, right? So you as an employee, you as a business owner or a seller win, your company wins. Here's the other part of this though. It is also a qualified retirement plan. So it's a business transition tool. ESOP is an employee ownership vehicle, and ESOP is a qualified retirement plan, actually set up under the same law as your 401k. Why does that matter?
I want to point out that in case it was not as clear as this ESOP means that you create this trust and you mentioned the employees. You are literally selling part of your company to your current employees. Did
Mhm.
I understand that
Yep.
correctly?
So,
Okay.
but so
And
here,
this
so
trust
here's what that
control that.
means, though, is
Yeah,
is
tell
the
me.
trust controls it, but these employees are beneficiary owners. So this
Okay.
ESOP happens at no cost to them based on the
Okay.
parameters that are set up. They are awarded beneficiary shares. So they do not have decision making. They are not actually, they don't get to change the name of the company, hire and fire people, change the color in the break room walls. None of that. They are beneficiary owners. So
And they
you
don't
as
need
this,
I don't they
go
don't need
ahead.
an investment either, right?
Nope,
You're
nope,
not expecting your employees to have all this money sitting around and say, "Oh, I'm going to invest into this company." We're still
yep.
talking about a privately held company, right?
Yep, exactly. So you're still in control
Okay.
of what happens. The people who run the company before an ESOP transaction continue to run the company after. It's beautiful.
Okay.
And they have
That
complete
is
control over what
fantastic.
happens. So if because it's a qualified retirement plan, right? It's a business transition tool, an employee ownership vehicle, and a qualified retirement plan. There is a massive benefit. When we talked earlier about where's the cash going to come from and how it's after tax,
Yes.
right? After tax, you're paying back your obligation after tax, whether it's to a bank or to an individual, however you structure that. Well, what's really cool about this is if you're an ESOP, and let's start with this simple scenario. You're 100% employee owned because it's a qualified retirement plan. If you're 100% employee owned, if you're an S corp, you no longer pay federal taxes, and in 46 out of 50 states, you no longer pay state taxes. So to say that another way, the K1s that now go to you as the shareholder with the distribution to pay the taxes, the K1 will
Yep.
then go to the ESOP instead, and the ESOP doesn't have to pay a distribution, doesn't take the distribution to pay. The ESOP doesn't have to pay taxes because it's a qualified retirement plan. Why does that matter? Man, doesn't that make it a whole lot easier to meet that obligation if you're saving money on taxes, right? If you're not having
Well,
to
I
pay,
mean,
I mean,
no federal taxes, like don't
yeah,
stock taxes, depending where, like, yeah,
yeah,
sign me up, right? Like that is like, okay, taxes is a
yeah,
big one, which again is not what is, it really is relevant to our conversation today is because most of the time, these business owners have to go get a loan or take money after tax money
or bring
to
in
pay
investors. Yeah.
exactly to for someone to create the generate this money you had to pay to a spouse that is going to get tax-free money because they don't pay taxes on that money. You're literally
Hmm.
giving them money after your tax, which again, this is not thousands of dollars. These are millions of dollars what we're talking about. And the
Yep.
other reality of this is a lot of these businesses don't have the cash flow to say, oh, I'm going to take this $1 million, right? Because I think that, and this is one of the things that is very worrisome and really upsets me mostly is when you're going through this process, it's very hard for individuals that are not part of the business or the financial role that to understand that when they said, oh, well, the value of the business is X, whatever, and the, they bring the EBITDA, whatever it's called, I can pronounce that. But I'm like, okay, cash flow is not that. Your
Yep.
revenue is not your profit. And your profit is not your cash. So it's like, okay, all of those numbers have to, because just
Hmm.
because the business have a certain value doesn't mean you have this money sitting around. It looks profitable. Maybe you make money, but just because you see all that money coming in, that doesn't mean that the business is in itself contains this $1 million you can sign a check and go. So I think this
Yep.
is very important because taxes is a big deal. So we
Now,
talk
I do want to
about the
clarify
saving the
one thing,
money.
Gabriella, if that's
Oh
okay. I
yeah,
do want to
please.
clarify one thing is that
Sorry.
tax
Yeah.
savings is proportional. So if you're 50% employee owned, you get 50% of that tax benefit. If you're 30% employee owned, you
Okay.
get 30% of that tax benefit. So the only way you go tax free is if you're 100% employee owned. But again, 50% of that benefit is for most companies, like you said, massive. It makes a
It's
massive
better than
difference in how
100.
they approach this obligation that they have.
Of course.
Yep.
So talking about the percentage. So what is the most that a business owner can create in this, put in this ESOP as a percentage to sell to their employees to keep control of their business,
You
that
can
not to
sell
lose the
100%.
control over?
You can
And you
sell
still keep
100%.
control?
Yeah.
And you still keep control of the business.
Yeah.
Okay, that is fantastic because it really depends on how much money they need to pay.
Mhm.
Correct?
Yep.
Like this is we're talking about, okay, what are we having to give this other spouse? And okay, so you can get 100% and you still keep control of your business and you still keep your legacy intact.
Mhm.
Is that fair? Okay.
I'm
That
sorry for
is
everybody, people who are listening and not watching. I am nodding vigorously. So yes, absolutely.
okay. Okay. Yeah, because yeah, sometimes people are, I don't realize
Yeah.
that people sometimes they don't look at their phones and they're not looking at us. So yes, okay, this is a real yes. And I think that this is very important.
Hmm.
So I know you talk about the taxes and we talk about the trust and who has control. Let's not talk divorce yet. Let's talk in
Hmm.
general. A business owner is considering this as a succession or they need cash for whatever reason and they want
Hmm.
to kind of, or they want to be nice to their employees. How does the process work and what is necessary for this process to go through? And I think I want to talk a little bit about how is a business qualify for this, because not every business can qualify for ESOP,
No,
if I'm correct,
absolutely
right?
not.
Okay.
It's not for every
So,
business. So let's talk
okay.
about
So
who it's for, right? Let's talk about who
that's
fits,
perfect.
because it is
Yes.
not for everybody. And so the really good news, though, is there are steps along the way that you can take. You don't have to go from zero to ESOP. There are steps that you take
Okay.
as you're exploring this, and we'll talk through that. But who is it for? It is for businesses in the United States. You have to be a US based business, which occasionally I talk to people who are incorporated in Mexico or on an island somewhere. Um, US based. We recommend that you have typically a minimum of 15 to 20 employees. That's a guideline, not a rule, but that's usually a good place to start. Um, it's not about revenue. It's not about EBITDA numbers or anything like that. What I do want to say, though, is you have to be a business that's profitable and something that somebody would want to buy. ESOP's not an escape hatch. I talk to people all the time that say nobody will buy my business, so I'm just going to sell it to my employees. It doesn't work that way. The trustee does have an obligation to the employees to make sure it's something that is sellable when they buy it, right? So that matters. And the other thing I would say is if you are a company that is aligned with your employees, you care about your employees, you have a culture of communication and you have a culture of collaboration with your team, that goes a long way. Now, you don't have to have it coming in, but it's definitely something you want to think about because those numbers that I mentioned when you're growing, 2.3 to 2.5 or getting, the 5 to 6% productivity gains, those come from hard work of creating that culture where people buy into the idea that they're employee owners. Right. That doesn't just happen. That takes work. Right. So you got to
A
understand
lot.
that if you have a culture now that fosters that communication, then the culture after will naturally lend to ESOP in a more effective manner. And the last thing I'd say is you want to make sure that management is aligned on the idea, right? You don't want to just drop this in if you're not an active day-to-day participant in your business from a management perspective. You don't want to just drop this on your executive team and say, oh, by the way, I sold it to an ESOP. Good luck. Have fun running that. We'll let you know how it goes, right?
That's,
So,
yes.
but again, US based company, 15 to 20 employees and profitable, right? Profitable are the
Love
big
it.
thing.
I was
Oh,
going to ask you that. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
And so is every industry, because you just set up the parameters, right? But there's different
mhm.
industries, different type. And I'm asking this because, as you know, I work with business owners. I also work with a lot of physicians. And we're talking
Mhm.
about physicians that own their medical practices, which is a business, right? Like a lot of
Yep.
the times they don't really realize they own a business, they own a medical practice, but it is a business. Is there a particular industry or is there anything that would prevent a medical professional maybe or a service, because we're talking to companies and it feels like we're talking about products and not a service based company. There's some
Mhm.
service based companies that have employees, that have 10, 15, 20 employees. So is there a limit? Is there an industry that it will not be considered, or what are the caveats within those industries to be able to create the ESOP?
Sure. I mean, industry wise, the top industry for ESOP is professional services, engineers, accountants, architects, that kind of
Okay.
thing. Number
Okay.
two is manufacturing. Number
Okay.
three is
Makes sense.
construction. And number four, shockingly, is financial services. A lot of banks are partially employee owned, and people don't know that.
That's very
So,
interesting.
in the medical sense, in the medical community, they can absolutely be an ESOP. It varies state by state and how that's set up because a lot of states require that medical practices are owned by licensed physicians, right? So there are ways around that, and we can talk about that with the individuals. I don't want to get into the legal twists and turns that takes, but
Of course.
just please take away that absolutely it can be done for medical professionals. I have done them for clinics. I have done them for veterinarians, which a different facet of the medical world, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it can absolutely be done. That is not a problem.
That's fantastic. Okay.
Who doesn't it work for, by the way? If you're a nonprofit listening to this, sorry, doesn't make sense because you already don't pay
Oh,
taxes. So,
got
but I
it.
get that question a
Okay.
lot too. Yep.
So, quick question out of this is totally side. What about a franchise? Is that a thing for a franchise? Can it be
Yes,
done?
yes, but we'd again a lot like making sure we understand the state laws for physicians. If you're a franchise, we'd want to make sure that we peruse the franchise agreement and understand what's in it before we make a decision about moving anything forward. So, which is,
Okay. And if it's, is that for any franchise, not just medical?
yeah, for any franchise, we'd want to understand the franchise agreement before we made a decision about whether or not it's viable because every franchise operates differently.
Okay. Okay. But it could be done. And of course, I know
Hmm.
that every
Yeah,
single business is different. And yes, every time that we go into this, we had to look at everything that related to the business. And I know each
yeah.
franchise have different agreements, but that is also an option. There's a lot of couples that own franchises together. And,
Mhm.
we're trying to figure out how do we do that. And a lot of the franchises don't allow for division, by the way. Their agreements don't allow for like, okay, if you're going through a divorce, we're going to buy this franchise back from you because we don't want this to be part of the mess
Yeah.
that the divorce creates. So that's why I just thought of thinking that. So,
Yep. Yeah.
um,
Nothing like having the rug pulled off from underneath you and not having a choice, right? So, yep.
Which again, we're talking about a sole ownership, right? We're talking about the one ownership. And what happens if there's a partnership? What happens when there is two owners from a company and then one of them is going through a divorce? And I know that we also have to think about the operating agreement and their contracts because they are set up, and a lot of them are being proactive to setting up what is going to happen if one of them go through a divorce, because they don't want the company, because it suffers. Every time there's a divorce, the company suffers. But is this something that has to be done? Let's just, and maybe I'm going way into it, but I want to ask the question about two owners. I own this company with a third party, not my spouse. I'm going through a divorce, and the company is $20 million. So 10 are mine, 5 belongs to my spouse. Is this a possibility? Is this something that can be done that way, or we need both owners to be on it to create an ESOP to help the one owner of the company?
So not to hedge, obviously shareholder agreements matter here, right? So we definitely would want to understand that. But here's what I can tell you is, yeah, it happens all the time, right? Where you've got a group of owners and one of them, I've got a client right now in Northern Illinois. One of the owners is a 40% owner, and then there's a bunch of smaller owners underneath. He just wants to sell his 40%, and everybody underneath can choose what they want if they want to sell or not. And in this case, if they have a drag along in their shareholder agreement where once a majority rules, then everybody has to sell, that's an option too. But for the most part, you're allowed to make an individual decision. But I obviously would want to say we would want to be educating your partner as well, right? We would want to make sure everybody understands what's happening. We would want to make sure that they are on board, because you don't want to fracture that relationship either.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not going to say you just. Yeah, I'm not going to say, yeah, just go ahead and do it and your partner can't stop you. Technically, in most cases, probably not. But yeah, reality is we're going to want to make sure everybody's educated.
Yeah, and I just want to be very clear, and this is a disclosure. We're not saying yes or no to everything. We're just putting out the information, and every case is very different. It's the same way I approach all of my clients. Every case is very different. We cannot make assumptions, but knowing that there's an option that we can look into, it makes a big difference, especially for a business owner. So we're not saying, oh yeah, if you have this parameters that you just mentioned, you can go ahead and do it, because I know it doesn't work like that, and we're going to get into that. But I just wanted to know everyone to know that it could be, and having the opportunity to look into that option, it just makes sense, because you need to know all of your options before you make these decisions, basically.
Well, and that's why the first step in the process, I call it the I think I want to phase. Actually, for the purposes of your podcast, we'll call it the I think I have to phase, right? I think I have to.
I love it. Yes, I think I have to. I love it. So that would be the first step. I think I have to. So what do they do when my clients think they have to?
Yep. Right. Obviously, I'm not naive. People are going to jump into chat. They're going to Google stuff. They're going to learn as much as they can about ESOP before they have a conversation with somebody like me. But I tell people let's say 80% of my job is education. Right. And the other 20% is managing expectations, by the way, making sure that I'm telling you things that I can actually do. versus promising things I can't. I'm not private equity. I don't have to promise you anything and then walk it back later, right? We're going to try and do things right from the very beginning. So it's the I think I want to or I have to phase is just education. It's learning about ESOP. It's talking to somebody like me, understanding its impact on you, understanding the impact on your business, understanding the impact on your employees, and how you can meet your obligation through the divorce and still keep your business intact the way that you want it to be. If it works, that's awesome. If it doesn't, you're going to find that out early, and it doesn't cost you anything to do it. As a matter of fact, the I think I have to phase at the very end of it is the first place where you'd actually have to make an investment, and that's into something called a feasibility study. So I want to be clear. If you're looking at ESOP, you can have conversations and you can invest a small amount into exploring it formally through this study. And in a feasibility study, what we're going to do is we're going to do evaluations. So we're going to tell you what it's worth, which may come in handy in your process, right? There's a reason we have a litigation valuation specialist on our staff, who I believe was actually on your podcast.
Yes, Matt. Anybody can go back and see this one. This was the one before this one. So yeah, I know everybody. I'm hoping everybody went and listened to that one, because it was excellent about business valuations in divorce. So Yeah.
He is fantastic. And we actually have three Matts that
It's
work here at
amazing.
Vision Point Capital. So you've got two out of the three, which is awesome.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so you go through and you get a value of your company, which matters. And then we take that value and we plug it into the study. And the study, again, is going to show you your return, meaning how much money will
Okay.
you get based on a 30, 40, 50, 100% sale, right? Based on what you have to
Okay.
do for your divorce.
For
Um,
divorce.
or through the strategic options that you're considering, at least. It'll show you the impact on your company. It'll show you the impact on cash flow. It'll show you the impact of the tax savings that are part of that, right? Being an ESOP.
Okay.
So you'll see if your company is better off going this route versus other options, right?
Right.
Which is
Right.
fantastic. But you'll also see the impact on your employees. And again, I recognize for this situation, it's not a primary consideration for most of you. But man, doesn't it feel good to know that you're potentially changing employee lives? Publix, for example, the grocery store chain in the Southeast, is an ESOP. And there are
Yeah.
people that work there scanning groceries all day that do it for 20 years and walk away multimillionaires.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
you want to help solve the retirement crisis in this country, which let's be honest, what's the number? 80% of the people don't have enough to retire on,
Right.
then those aren't ESOP employees, right? So even though it's not your primary consideration, just please know and feel good about the fact that you're making a huge difference in the lives of people that work for you.
And I'm sure that business owners, they do care about the people that work for them too, right? The
They do,
problem
but
they're
it's not the
they
reason they
run
started this road, right?
there is not, but also we're too busy with their own emotions. Their marriage
Mhm.
is breaking apart. They may
Yeah.
have issues with their children, or they can't see their children. They're not just trying to figure out how we're going to divide this business, is the house and the accounts and is everything else. So I think it's a very emotional state to say, oh, I'm going to go and think about
Mhm.
my employees. But I like that they will help. And it probably will help because as a business owner, uh, I cannot imagine when they have to sell the business, which is a lot of the times they do, because they didn't work with me yet and they did not learn about you through me, because I think that will change a lot of business ownership
Yeah.
going forward, especially going through a divorce. But I feel like it's different when you stay in front of your employees and you say, hey, by the way, I appreciate all that you've done for us. You helped me grow this business, but I'm closing because I have to sell, or I
And
had to
all the
bring an
employees there know
investor.
it's happening, right? So they know you're getting divorced
Right.
and they're
They
worried about
know
these
what's
things
happened,
too.
and they're all worried because, as an employee, they are worried about what is happening now, because they can see the tension and the stress and everything else. And not only that, if you don't sell, you bring an investor, but you know what happens, right? They come up with their own people and they try to figure out how we're going to change this. And that's when the legacy
Mhm.
goes away, potentially your employees. But if you say, hey, I'm going through this process, but guess what? I'm going to give you a little piece of this pie so you can be invested in our company and we can continue to grow. That changes the message, because
Mhm.
you know that divorce is one of the biggest, is a reality. Business lost to divorce are like 80% of the businesses in the
Mhm.
United States, because they can survive the big equalizing payments that have to be done to a spouse because of the divorce. This is a financial reality that business owners and they feel, or they think, and I have worked with my clients a lot to make sure they understand the obligations when they come up with these solutions in mediation and say, okay, we're going to have to pay this money, and make sure that we incorporate that in your financial plan. But a lot of the times they don't, and then they end up having to sell the business. And it's not the same. You're not selling the business from a high point and said, oh, I'm going to go sell my business, not because I have to, and I am going to get the most money I can. You're selling from a very bad place. And I will tell you one thing, and this is very realistic, and a lot of people don't like when I say it, and I work with individuals on both sides, business owners or the spouses. One of the biggest things that someone says is, my business is not doing well. After, when someone starts the divorce process, the business starts doing bad. Well, I understand that that is a thing that we say, a business owner says, because they're going through a divorce, you want the value of your business to go down. But emotionally, you're not present anymore in your business. And that affects your business and affects your employees, which in return affects the revenue on the business. So again, having this opportunity to save the business, help your employees, and continue with your legacy and not go bankrupt, because it happens. That is a big thing.
Well, I was just gonna
That
say
is,
I can back up your numbers though. So full disclosure, before I started and sold
tell
my
me,
business, I
yes.
was a bank executive, and I
Oh,
could tell
okay.
stories. So I just wanted to tell everybody
Mm,
listening, Gabriella speaks truth about the impact on individuals and companies, and the reasons companies go under. I saw it over and over again. Suddenly there's a divorce and you're like, "Ooh, that loan was so good too. That's too bad." Because that's when you know that's honestly, that's almost an automatic watch list as a banker because you know that things are going to change drastically. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
So,
very interesting. I never
yeah.
thought about how, the financial
Yeah.
institutions look at that.
Well,
So,
this is experience, right? So I just wanted to point out that you're
which
telling the
makes
truth.
sense.
Yeah,
It makes total sense.
which is why this option matters, could potentially matter so much. So if you go through that feasibility process, in the end, what you're getting, as
Yes.
I just want to be clear, is a decision-making tool. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's a decision that'll show you the value. It's a decision to decide if employee ownership makes sense, um, as a solution to solve the problems that you were just talking about, Gabriella.
So basically, and this goes to my clients is, let's talk about the timing, right?
Mhm.
If my clients, we know that we are going, and how long it takes for this study to come, so you have your
A
options and
feasibility
you have
study,
this summary.
on average, 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the
let's say
single
I'm
biggest
setting up.
limiting factor is how fast can you get me financial information. So,
That's always the problem, right? Business valuations is all about the documents.
yeah.
So if I'm going with a client to mediation in July, and he works with you or she works with you, and we get this study, when we walk into that room, that study will make a difference because we would know right ahead of time whether is available, how much, and how it would be an advantage for my client. Which, by the way, I want to mention this because this is, it's not just about the business. When we do the divorce financial strategy, there's all kinds of things and components. Are you going to do a study that is also going to help them understand how much they're going to save in taxes? So when we have a very good picture of their budget and their finances, that will be incorporated into this
That's part
summary
of the
report.
study is the impact of the company
Okay.
on the cash flow. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because we
Okay.
got to make sure it
Okay.
works. The last thing, my job is to create the most successful ESOPs in the country, and I'm pretty sure a company that can't afford to pay the ESOP obligations is not a successful one, right? So we've got to know that ahead of time, based on current and future projections. What's this going to look like 3, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? We want
Perfect.
to make sure we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. It's that easy.
And this is so important. We're going to walk into that courtroom, into the mediation room, knowing that we have this ability. So when we're talking to the mediator and offering a potential settlement, and we say, okay, well, you had to pay your spouse 3 million, my client could easily say done, and then we're good because they are not worrying about how we're going to incorporate this, talking to the CPA, talking to everyone, because they are already prepared. Preparation is so important when it
Mhm.
comes to that. Is it fair to say that this gives them more confidence so they don't panic? I feel like my clients will feel so much confidence when they come with this, which I know it comes with a price. You need to do this study, but I almost feel like you're going to say yes or no, right? They're going to know. This is not going to be like, well, maybe you can do it, go to mediation and see, we can talk after, right? This is like, okay, yes, if you do this study, I can tell you, yes, you can make it work. So there's like a bottom. They say, well, I don't want to give 100%. I want to do 50%. What is the
Mhm.
numbers? How do they look? And then we are in a mediation. So we know that, yes, he has the ability to create this when you're going to this mediation. But how does it work with the process wise? Okay, we go to mediation, we settle this, we decide that, yes, they're going to do this, create this ESOP with 30% of the value of the company. So what happens next? We are saying yes to this individual. We're
Mhm.
going to pay them this amount of money. Where does the money come from? Because my client still doesn't have money, and the employees are not going to have to make an investment. So where do we
Sure.
get the money?
After the I think I have to phase, it turns into the I know I have to phase, right? And that's where you
Now
get
I have
into
to
the,
pay.
yeah, now I have to.
Yes,
And that
you
gets into the
must.
process of actually creating the ESOP. That is a 4 to 6 month process. Okay.
Okay, that's good. That's important. Okay.
Yes, right. It doesn't just happen overnight, and you got to hire the trustee and the attorneys and everybody to kind of make that happen. And there's a negotiation. ESOP, when you sell to an ESOP, you're not sacrificing price, you're not sacrificing your return. You make just as much, if not more, than if you'd sold it to private equity or to a third party or other investors, right? So you're not limiting yourself there. But The truth of it is it does take time to set up. But the other side of it is if you're bringing investors or you're doing other financing, that takes time too, about the same amount of time most of the
Oh,
time. So it's not
yes.
instant.
Yep.
Not instant. Uh, the other thing about ESOP that may not fit every situation is yes, bank
Okay.
financing is absolutely a component of that. And depending on the business, you may be able to finance everything you need through the bank, but not always,
Okay.
which means there may be a
Okay.
component of seller financing, which
Okay.
means that you may be paying yourself or paying your ex over time. Now, there would
Okay.
be interest involved, so you or they would be earning interest, usually a percent or so above the going rate. But
Mhm.
on the same token, that is something that you need to be prepared to discuss and negotiate, right? Like, hey,
Right.
this is how we're going
Yes.
about this. This is how much you're going to make. This is when you're going to get paid and how you're going to get paid.
And
So
when my clients we walk into this mediation room, we will know this from this study that you created.
that would
Is
be the
that
plan. Yep.
going to be part of it? Okay.
Yep, that would be the
Okay.
plan, right? So we can show how that money gets paid out and when it gets paid out. Now, when I say over time too, I'm also not talking if I'm not talking 20 years, I'm talking 3 to 5 to maybe 7 years if it really is it all depends on the company cash flow. And that's what the study tells us, how we can structure it to make sure that we meet the obligation that they have.
Okay. And then they will be paying to the bank, but they are getting the tax advantage that they don't get if they're paying
Mhm.
their spouse this quarterly payments for 5 years with interest because they're setting it up through the ESOP. So that means that they get the tax advantages. So they're literally
Yep.
saving money.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
ideally, they're saving enough money to make the payments, right? They're offsetting it. So there's in the end, I mean, that's the game we're playing, right? Is we're getting the tax benefit while paying the obligation. And if we're doing this right, in a lot of instances, they offset.
Yep.
So your company just keeps going forward.
And
Not
that is the
always,
most important part of this.
but
Yeah.
that's part of that study is so we can understand that from the start. We want to see the impact.
Yeah, and I think that this is so important. Like walking into a mediation, knowing this and having this in my back pocket for my clients, it just changed the whole strategy because you're not going from a fear point of view of, oh my God, how am I going to pay or am I going to lose my business to a fear of, okay, I got this because there's an option.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, and you said the
so
word
is
confidence before. I would actually add the word maybe even calm on top. You go into those mediations with a sense of calm because the thing that you're most worried about, you know you have under control.
why is this a secret? Why nobody's talking about this, Matt? Why are we not hearing about ESOPs more often?
So there's a couple of different reasons, right? And it's again, we've already talked about some of them. It's not for every business. We've talked about some of the
Of
businesses that it
course.
fits for. Um, there's a cost to doing a study and setting up an ESOP. Ironically, it costs a lot less than hiring an M&A broker to go find investors for you. And they're taking 5, 6% ESOP. It's a flat fee, it's not a percentage, and it is a fraction of that. It also costs money to maintain, and you have to get a valuation done every year to set a share price. You're going to have a trustee that oversees that. You're going to have a third party administrator, just like you have for your 401k. Again, if you're saving millions in taxes, you don't care about paying a few that 40 to 60,000 a year for that, right? So it doesn't matter. But those things are there, and I don't want to hide them. We talked about that almost every seller gets paid out over time in an ESOP transaction
Yes.
versus all at once. That can be frustrating, but do you honestly want the biggest reason I think this doesn't get talked about more? Because the
No.
people that business owners go to seek business transition help don't get paid to sell this.
Yeah.
The PE people that are cold calling them, offering them money, don't want you to know about this. The M&A brokers don't make 5, 6, 7% if you go this route because they don't know anything about it and they don't want you to because they don't make money that way.
No.
So it's not complex. It's not difficult. The reason it's niche is because the people that get paid to do these things for a living aren't talking about it. The money's not there for them to do it. That's my cynical
Yeah.
side.
I have the same side that you just brought up. I feel the same way about a lot of other professionals out in the world. I feel like that is one of the biggest challenges that these high net worth business owners, physicians have when they're going through a divorce. And that's why it's so important for me to get this information out, because this is giving them an option and an opportunity that is not taking advantage of a very emotional and soul crushing situation, and taking advantage of the fear of the fact that you're going to lose everything. We can sell your practice, we can sell your business, and you get this money, and then you can move on. And is not looking into the benefit of the business owner that is going through this process, even their spouse and their employees. And it's so difficult for me sometimes. And I see this everywhere with other professionals that are not giving the clients the opportunities because there's nothing for them to gain out of those opportunities. Now, the gain is, let's help this business owner preserve their legacy and their life work. And I'm not trying to diminish the spouse that was at home taking care of the kids. That is not, because the identity of the business owner is their business. Like when you create a business, that's you. And if the next day you don't have that business, I understand you have family or kids, but at the same time, you're like, who am I? Because I was this business owner for 20 years, right?
Well,
and that's why
I'm
succession
laughing.
is so important.
When
Yeah.
I was in banking, I would sit with business owners and I would be like, why is this their whole life? I don't get it. Like I'm like, and I was an executive, right? So I was kind
Yeah.
of a big deal. And at the same time, I didn't get it until I started my own business. And then I very
Yes.
quickly understood just how much it consumes you and becomes part of who you are. And I'm going to be honest, when I sold my business, it was the single most difficult decision I ever made. I spent less time thinking about where I was going to go to college and what I was going to do for a living and whether or not I was going to get married and have kids than I
Right.
did thinking about selling my business. I didn't lose sleep over those things, but I lost sleep trying to decide if the offer I got was one I wanted to accept. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's when I say I've been where you guys are, man, I know,
Yeah.
I get it.
It's tough. It's tough.
Hmm.
And you're in a position where you have to do it. This is not even, maybe I'll save my business and I go buy me a place in Italy and move there. This is, I have to, because I have this obligation. I had to come up with all this money. So it's
Hmm.
almost forced upon you. And yes, it's literally your legacy in a business owner's um livelihood. Is not just about making money. It's about
Hmm.
creating this thing that you come out. You created out of thin air. You came out with this. I love this conversation, Matt. And like I said earlier, I feel like we're even scratching the surface. I think that we can even have another conversation. We go deep down, because I think the business valuations have a lot to do with this, and the way that a business is looking to in divorce, which is not the same way that we look at a business in general as an M&A
Yeah.
transaction. We look into the business. So I think that's very important. And I feel like, okay, we need to continue this conversation because it's very important. And I know you said it. People are going to go to ChatGPT. They're going to go to Google, try to find out. I will honestly recommend, if you are in the middle of a divorce, please reach out to me. Please reach out to Matt. Do not go with ChatGPT. There's so many nuances, and the strategy that an individual brings to these conversations, ChatGPT cannot bring it. I'm sorry, it just can, because we have the experience. Because I know we talk about physicians, how there are ways to make it work, and we didn't even get the dive. And I think I would love
No.
to talk about that more in another
Hmm.
conversation, because there's ways to make this work for physicians too, and it's very
Well,
important.
two words, Gabriella, we could strip that away. Holding company. Keep going. You're doing
Okay.
great.
And then, okay, so that would be the cliffhanger. We're
Yeah.
going to come back and talk about that for my physicians audience, because that's very important. My clients, I mean, that is a real thing. It's a real thing for anyone that owns a business and is going through a divorce and they're going to
Hmm.
have to sell. But Matt, thank you for this conversation. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the information. If anyone is going through divorce, if you know anyone that owns a business and is going, please send this episode to them. Please listen to them. We're going to put all the information to reach out to Matt in the comments when we go live. And what do you want to tell those business owners? What is your message to them?
I would tell them that there are more options than they're even aware of to save their business through this process. If you want to learn a little bit about it, obviously Gabriella is an expert, but you can also go to esopready.com. And there you can start this process of I think I have to, right? and you can start to learn about it before you even have to talk to somebody like me. ESOPready.com. If you like what you see, you can schedule time with me there. It's all free. Just enjoy it, learn about it. It's all about getting comfortable with the idea before you dig deep.
I love it. And you took my words out of my mouth. I was going to say, business owners going through a divorce, the most important, if you didn't get anything out of this conversation, is you have options and you don't have to lose your business to this process. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. And I will see you in a couple of weeks again with another episode with more information about divorce and money. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriella.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. If you're going through a separation or divorce, please contact me through my website at everafterwealth.com. I would love to be a resource and partner as you navigate this season and prepare for your financial future. I'll see you in the next episode.